Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. My name is Marlon Hibbert. I would like to welcome you to our meeting on the Dorothea Watershed Management Plan. It is, I should say, we are excited because this is the second meeting we're having out. At the last one in April of this year was our kickoff meeting, and along with our consultants, the Watershed Consulting Associates, we have been putting in a lot of work behind the scenes. We had a field visit completed. The consultants were here on the ground with DPNR staff and other members of the community and other members of DPNR team. Did some assessments and we're here to present. But consultants are here to present what we found. And I know many of you might be saying, oh, well, how does this tie in with any other projects that are happening? And this is when we started this kickoff in April. I think I opened the conversation by saying that this was in response to and what we had heard from the community in meetings before in other settings, that the Dorothea Watershed was one of particular importance to the St. Thomas community. And we worked with our federal partners to find some extra funding to do so, and we added it to what was an ongoing project which developed 8 other watershed plans across the territory. Our consultants were very flexible, Watershed Consulting Associates, and we're thankful to them that they said, yes, we can do this work, and we can just add it on to our existing contract and workload. And they took it on. And we're very excited to see the products that they've come up with. I do want to also make a note of tying it into the overall planning effort that EPNR is undertaking. As many of you are aware, we are undertaking a comprehensive land and water use plan. As I mentioned before, we've also undertaken 8 other different watershed plans. So DPNR is taking very seriously that planning and natural resources component of our name. And this is one of those projects that we're taking. Recently, we were in the Dorothea Watershed for a separate project. And I'd like to reassure you that both projects have been talking to each other because both sets of consultants have shared information. And so the 2 projects are not happening in isolation, but are rather complementary to each other. It just so happens that this was planned for a little later than the other ones, and they were not combined. So just want to reassure the public that we're not standing in silos, but rather this is a communication that's happening across agencies, across divisions within the agency as well. I just like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Angel Volkels, who is directly behind me, and hopefully when I don't say the right things, he'll tap me on my shoulder. But welcome, Senator. Thank you for coming out. We have, a number of persons remotely. I also wanted to, and maybe at a later date, welcome Commissioner. Commissioner is here, but will join in discussions afterwards. So I would just like to pass it on to Andrea Storizo of Watershed Consulting Associates. And thank you all for being here, and we hope to have a robust discussion on this Watershed Management Plan that's going to be presented. But how should I say, the findings of our field visits and some suggestions as to recommendations and what we found. We hope to have some focused conversations. So thank you again for attending, and we look forward to those conversations with you. Andreas?
Great, thanks, Director Hibbert. Give me just a minute here to get set up.
Video.
Okay, great. Hopefully everybody can see my screen.
We're good.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Andres Terizo with Watershed Consulting. And I'm pleased to be here tonight to present our second meeting on the Dorothea Watershed Management Plan that we've been working on here for the past several months. So this is really a follow-up to our first plan. So for those that are attending that were at the first meeting, there'll be a little bit of review. I'll try to go through that quickly so we can kind of get to kind of the meat of the presentation, and which is really related to kind of what our findings are, and then save enough time here at the end to open it up to discussion, because we really would like the community feedback on the way that the plan is going, and hear from the community. So with that, I'll just go ahead and launch in. So everybody is muted, but please feel free to use the chat function and enter any questions as we go along. And when we get to the Q&A section, we'll make sure all the questions are read, and we can have a dialogue, and we can unmute people at that point in time as well, so they can talk live. And if we don't get to any of the questions, we'll be sure that we do answer them in a follow-up. So just to kind of give the quick overview of our project, this is a project heading up by Watershed Consulting. We've to date completed several other watershed management plans in the territory. We've completed 3 on St. Thomas and 5 on St. Croix, listed below here. So this plan is a follow-up to those other plans that we've prepared. And really just a quick review for those who might not be familiar with what a watershed is. A watershed is really just an area of land that channels runoff and groundwater to a common point, such as a gut, and then out to the sea. So when we talk about Dorothea, we're not really talking about one point. We're talking about a few different common points, but really still we're talking about the area of Hull Bay over to Carrot Bay. So, that area, that watershed area, is really our focus of study. And I'm going to be providing some maps here to show exactly where we focused in on. But before I do, really just to look at, what is this ridge to reef approach? This is really what we are interested in, utilizing for this project, and what we've used on some of our other projects. Is really looking at things, the watershed, really from the top of the watershed all the way down to the sea, and in all the different components of and interactions within the watershed. This graphic here from Coral Bay really illustrates a lot of the things that we're looking at. The hydrology, we're looking at infrastructure, obviously roads, homes, culverts, that type of thing. Partnerships. There's a lot of different stakeholders and community members within the watershed that really play a part in a watershed management plan. And looking at the things like the water quality, really not just within Hull Bay or the other bays, but also within the guts that drain through the watershed. So that's just a nice graphic in terms of, illustrating this ridge to reef watershed management approach. And so here on the left side of the screen are really the 8 main steps that we believe are necessary to complete a successful watershed management plan. And so just looking at these steps, from the initial part of this project was really the kickoff with the stakeholders. And then really looking at the existing conditions within the watershed. How's the water flowing now? What's the condition of things like culverts and swales within the watershed, the roads, where are the homes clustered, where's the development clustered, where are the areas where there's open space that's still available to protect. Then, once we get a handle on those existing conditions, we're analyzing all of the existing data that's been produced. In this case, there were, which is the case in a lot of these watersheds, there's existing data reports, which may be old, but they certainly have some valuable pieces to them. So we do a lot of research initially to figure out what others have done in the watershed and what people have learned so far. So we're not starting from zero. We're starting from, with the knowledge that's already been developed in the watershed. We use a lot of watershed modeling tools in order to predict flow, stormwater flow, and also predict pollutant loading. When I talk about pollutant loading, we're talking about things that are caught up in stormwater when it flows down through the watershed, things like nutrients or sediment or oils and greases, toxics, all the potentially harmful materials that are being picked up in stormwater as it flows down through the watershed. Then we've really done some robust community outreach. And so we had a previous community meeting on the topic of the Dorothea Watershed Plan. We've also done a day of training, which I'm going to show a slide on, for trainers, basically how to train, in watershed management. We did an on-site day several months ago. We've really looked at where the key places are in the watershed for best management practices. So when we talk about best management practices, we're talking about things like ponds or bioretention or swales or sediment traps, check dams, the practices which implemented correctly and in the right places in the watershed can really help control stormwater runoff and also reduce the amount of pollutants which are making their way to guts and also to the ocean. And then once we identify where those best management practices are, we're really looking at the design of the best management practice. And that's really where we are right now. And then we're going to complete this project shortly with a final watershed management plan. And that's going to be kind of a guiding document. Higher amount of impervious cover, we get to more degraded conditions. So that's just kind of a good note to be mindful of as the watershed gets built out. Utilizing BMPs is increasingly more important.
Andres, I believe your screen share just stopped. I think you froze for a second.
Okay.
Yes, Andres, we did lose you for about 45 seconds.
The last I saw, you had just finished describing the 8 steps of the plan. So maybe we could just start back there.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. Just
Alright,
had a freeze. Okay, we can see that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead here and just talk about some of the problem drivers in the watershed. So these are things that are really contributing to water quality impairment in Dorothea Watershed. So one of the key issues is sedimentation from poorly planned development or improper erosion sediment control. So just some examples of some exposed earth where, left, when it's not raining, obviously this is not a problem, but during heavy rainfall events, a lot of this sediment gets picked up and easily moved downstream. So another issue is unpaved road erosion. So unpaved road erosion is where we're getting runoff over roads like Nelteberg Road. That's just one that we're going to focus in on here in a little bit. And there are some other unpaved roads in the watershed. And so unpaved roads are hotspots, for sedimentation. So these are another thing that are kind of a focus of our plan, is focusing in on where unpaved roads are located. So impervious surface hydrologic connection. So really we're talking about how our developed road network really focuses the energy of stormwater runoff and creates conduits for stormwater runoff to flow down to the bay and really pick up a lot of energy along the way. And so our road networks really unintentionally have resulted in this hydrologic connection. So we're really interested in trying to disconnect stormwater and really spread it out across the watershed rather than focusing it at one or two locations. So solid waste and wastewater issues are our major source of pollutants, not only in Dorothea, but also in other watersheds all over the territory. Stormwater coming in contact with things like trash or oils and greases or wastewater allows for, picking up things like bacteria and other toxic materials. And so, that's a real, what I would call low-hanging fruit, I guess, in terms of, a thing that can be, once addressed, will really have a big impact and a big benefit on water quality in the watershed. So unmaintained or inadequate infrastructure, really just showing a quick video here of a catch basin and some water that's just basically bypassing. And this is a really common issue, not just in the territory, but everywhere, where you have infrastructure which is old and, the pavement cracks and things settle. And then, really that infrastructure is really no longer being effective. So when it's raining, that water is going right past that catch basin. And what it's doing is really resulting in that water going to places where it's unintended and creating problems downstream, in this case, down somebody's driveway towards their home. So obviously in this case, it's a really small runoff event, but in some cases where it's really large, it could result in a significant problem. So with all those problems, what are the consequences? I know that one thing that everybody's most familiar with is flooding impact. So when we talk about flooding impact, we see a lot of water, kind of getting channelized down our paved roads, and really, focusing, like I was saying, that energy. And you can also see the color of the water, the turbidity, that water has a lot of sediment in it. So it's not only the volume of water, but also what's being carried in the water. So as I was saying, the sedimentation, that turbidity is really detrimental, not only to gut health, but also to the nearshore environment. And then bacteria, I'd mentioned bacteria. So bacteria is an issue, obviously, for swimmers. It's an issue for people fishing, people wading in guts, using the beaches. So bacteria is another major consequence of improperly managed stormwater. So what can we do about all those things? In Dorothea, one thing that we've really focused on is doing a land use analysis. So this is really kind of one of the first steps in our project. So this is acquiring high resolution, really crisp imagery, up-to-date imagery, LiDAR, which is basically topography. So we can really understand the land surface and how water moves. And then the development of land use land cover data sets. So showing some examples of that. So we use a drone to collect very high resolution, very crisp imagery. And just to kind of show an example of that in Hull Bay, zooming in on that data that we've collected, you can see the resolution is so great that we can really zoom in very far. And this is not just kind of neat and fun, it also serves a really important purpose. It allows us to really understand the smaller drainage paths and to understand how land use is changing. So this is just an example here from Nelteberg. If you look, this is from 2019 to 2023. We'll go ahead and see the change from 2019 to 2023. And you can see right now we're looking at the 2019 condition. Here's the 2023 condition. You can see there's a lot of new disturbance here already. And so we're interested in understanding this because we need to know how the watershed is changing and how land use is changing, so we can inform the modeling that we're doing and also the best management practice design. So by collecting all that drone imagery, we're producing land cover mapping. So this is really looking at categorizing the different land uses into these different classifications, things like bare soil, buildings, grass, and really, breaking it all down very discreetly. And so now, having this data set, it's really useful for our project, but it's also going to be useful for projects in the future as well. So one of the other things that we can do with this data is we can predict the future development risk. So this is really just a planning exercise here that's being presented on the screen, looking at from year 2003 out to year 2100, how development may change in the watershed based on the land use development patterns to date. So really what we're doing is projecting out and looking at these tiles, which are these orange tiles, are really areas where there's greater than 20% impervious. And if you just kind of look, generally you kind of look at the trend here, you can see that basically the amount of impervious is projected to increase as we go out to 2100. So really what that's telling us is, the best management practices and really active stormwater management is really not just important today, but it's going to even become more important as land use, gets developed, and also that the climate is changing and, storms are becoming more severe. So we really need to start planning for this active stormwater management now. So one of the things that we do right off the bat is understand where the infrastructure is, to understand really how stormwater is flowing down through the watershed, and really where there are vulnerable points currently. So we look at things like culverts and ditches, and we look at the condition of those ditches. We also look at where those culverts and ditches are bringing the stormwater, but whether or not the inlets are blocked or whether the infrastructure is failing. So we mapped all this in the field, and then we have this all now inventoried in a database that we use and that we're going to be handing over to DPNR once this project is done for their use and for other people's use. So I mentioned it earlier, but another really important thing in this watershed is outreach. And so we had developed a series of training modules, and we actually presented those training modules to a group of trainers, DPNR and other folks, on a day training, and where we went around to different sites in the watershed and actually went through and demoed the training modules that we developed. And so, these are materials now that are going to be available for DPNR and others other trainers to use in the future to educate people on watershed management. So another tool that we're relying on in this study is visual monitoring. So we have a time-lapse cameras deployed at 4 key locations in the watershed. And those 4 key locations are shown by these purple pluses. And these are really what they allow us to do is really understand how water flow changes in the guts, and also how the color of the guts change over time. And we're looking at pairing these photos with rain gauge data so we can really understand the relationships between the flow in the guts and the color in the guts, the turbidity and rainfall. So just for an example, at Dorothea here, you can see, there's a change here with the water level kind of rising up and the color of the gut change. over the course of a few days, and this is a result of a recent rainfall. So just for an example, you can also catch things like wildlife on these cameras as well. So one of the key things that we're looking at as a tool in this watershed is road stabilization. So just for an example of the different practices which can be applied to roads, starting on the left, we have road paving in certain locations can be really useful with concrete water bars, and energy dissipators, basically ways to, as the water flows off the road, stop any erosion and kind of reduce the energy of that water. We have grass swales with check dams, and we have water bars and upgraded infrastructure, really new culverts in some places where culverts don't exist or where culverts are inadequate. We're also really interested in land stabilization type BMPs. So these are things like retaining walls in some locations, especially along roads like Neltyburg. There's a lot of locations where there could really be a benefit from doing something like this with these these are gabion, called gabion dams, and then vegetating those terraces. So land stabilization, retaining steep slopes, especially in such a steep slope environment, is another really critical tool. Another thing is stormwater basins. So just drawing your attention to the basin on the left, this is actually in Hull Bay, and this is a really interesting practice which is really effective at controlling runoff in the watershed and preventing runoff from making its way into the sea, and also serving as a way to have a source for all of the material which accumulates in that basin over time is nice organic material which can then be reutilized. And so this is just a thought where these stormwater basins don't really always serve one purpose. They can serve the purpose of being a source for fertile topsoil material to good growing material, and then also the water itself can be used for capture and reuse and irrigation. So talking about irrigation, there are some existing water sources in the watershed, some existing basins, ponds, and also some engineered traps like this one down in the lower right, where these are really, there's really good opportunities to improve these and make these even more beneficial for capturing and reusing stormwater, and also controlling stormwater downstream of these structures. So looking at bioretention basins, so essentially just planted basins where the plants can be even things like fruit trees. They can be designed to be very aesthetic practices, and so we're looking at a few different locations for bioretention basins, and one in particular in Hull Bay, which I'm going to present here in a minute. But before I do, just to kind of follow through with a lot of our the workflow that we were doing as a part of this watershed management plan, this best management practice assessment. So just to kind of give an idea here, we do a lot of work initially on the computer, which is the desktop assessment, and kind of identify areas initially on the desktop. And in addition to the actual points, we also identify all the areas of government land in the watershed. So that really kind of tells us where potentially there could be kind of an easy path forward of putting in a best management practices if it's already owned land owned by the government. But then we get out in the field. And so for this project, we identified a number of different field sites. We had several days in the field where we actually verified the work that we had done initially on the desktop, and then made a lot of changes and adjustments. So in the end, we scoped 176 sites in the watershed. So these are all going to be documented in our final plan deliverables. And then what we did was we actually ranked those. And so all of those aren't, as important. Some are more important than others. And so we use a series of metrics to really understand where are the projects which are most important. And so, looking at this map, we're able to apply our ranking, and then really, which allowed us to really focus in on where are the most important projects for improving water quality. And so out of that huge list, we've come up with a top 10 or so, and out of that, there are two projects in particular that we wanted to showcase tonight, which we're going to be producing some initial conceptual plans for as a part of our scope of work. So one of those projects is in Hull Bay, and the other one is along the Neltyburg Road. So first, just to present what our thoughts were on Hull Bay. So this is a photo here of the road down to Hull Bay, and you can see on the right, there's some erosion and some bare land. And this is an area that's really part of our focus, really trying to address how stormwater flows from up above down the road. And then, really this exposed land here on the side of the road, this is an area where people kind of pull in their vehicles, and you can see it's been hardened. It's been, there's no vegetation there, and it's an area where stormwater flows. So every time it rains, there's a lot of potential for pollutants to be picked up in these areas and brought into the bay. So before I get into the details of Hull Bay, just to present kind of the overview of Neltyburg. So Neltyburg, there's a lot of exposed soil on Neltyburg. There's a lot of slopes in need of retainment, like I was saying. There's also a lot of sections of the road where stormwater flows directly over the road surface, and that's carving a lot of erosion and resulting in a lot of impact to the road surface. So within Hull Bay, our design concept is really twofold. Number one, it's to improve the vegetated buffer between the parking lot and the beach. And two, improve the conveyance of stormwater via a swale, which is really just a shallow constructed channel. And then also a bioretention basin. So looking at this graphic, the areas in green are where we were suggesting would be a good place for an improved vegetated screen between the parking area and the beach, to allow for buffering of any runoff from the parking lot towards the beach. And then also the swale, which is shown here in orange, is a proposed improvement that would be bringing stormwater down in a controlled manner into a new bioretention basin. So this bioretention basin is shown here in green. And this would be a way for, before that water is actually discharged into the bay, actually manage that water in a large vegetated basin to drop out all the sediment and prevent that runoff from going directly into the bay. And so just a note about this, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the other project discussion that's happening here. So just want to make it clear, I think that, this plan that we're presenting here tonight was really done it really has value with or without that other project. I think there's a real need for this project. And so, the conceptual plan that we have was really done in concert, in communication with that other plan. But at the same time, this area is a need regardless. And so I think that this is just a good, strong focus area for additional management. And I think it would work really well with the plan that's already being that has already been presented for the improvements in Hull Bay. So just to kind of give a photo, we're talking again about bioretention, basically a planted basin. So the goals of this project: really slow and filter stormwater runoff, reduce flooding, improve water quality, and also improve the conveyance of the stormwater. So on Neltyburg, just to get into some of the details, our design concept involves more distributed practices. So we're not talking about one specific practice, but several practices along the road to help control sedimentation and runoff. So these would include things like water bars, sediment traps, stabilizing the road surface, and disconnecting the road network. As opposed to having the connection, when I talked about the hydrologic connection, we want to try to disconnect. So we want to try to break up the stormwater flows along the road so that it's not all draining down to one location. So this is just a quick video clip of what I'm talking about. So really looking at this video, the lighter blue areas are the drainage collection areas. The darker blue areas are kind of the water flow. And then those little colored areas are the different types of practices. When we talk about sediment traps and water bars, those are areas along the road where we have scoped these different various improvements to mitigate the runoff from that road. So, the goals here: slow and filter in stormwater, direct the water off the road as quickly as possible so that we reduce the erosion to the road surface itself, and we prevent the water from flowing down the road. Instead, we want the water to flow off the road, and then we want to reduce flooding. Obviously, we want to improve water quality at the bottom of the bay and also in the guts that flow down along that road. So this is just some schematics of some of these different practices that we were talking about. Just some different, potential solutions here. These water bar, this is actually a trench drain, but this graphic down here is just an idea of, basically how important it is to have a good crown on the road so that the water flows off the road rather than down along the road. And then this graphic here on the right, basically getting that flow to come out into various turnouts along the road. So you've seen these before, but these are really just, again, graphic reminders of what we're talking about. So stabilizing a lot of the slopes, which are currently bare and exposed, with things like gabion retaining walls like this, and then also providing stone outlets where stormwater flow is currently exiting out before it gets to the guts, so we can stabilize those exit points from the road, and doing things like water bars with energy dissipators, and probably check dams as well in some of the swales. So in terms of our project next steps, and I'm just about getting close here to wrapping up and getting into the Q&A portion of the presentation. But just to give an idea of where we're at, so we're really kind of towards the tail end of this project right now, wrapping up the best management practice design, and then we're going to be finalizing the watershed management plan, and then presenting that watershed management plan to DPNR. So, that's really going to be the final step. So I think with that, we're really just interested in hearing any feedback tonight so that we can incorporate that into our plan. And we would really like to hear, if it's not tonight, it's certainly not too late to give us any information about any points of interest in the watershed that you might think would be useful in terms of dump sites, erosion, drainage that's being directed down the roads away from guts, unstable areas, septic leaks, cloudy or dirty water, areas which are always a flooding issue, or broken or clogged infrastructure, anything like that. Just shoot me an email here, and I would love to get that information, because we really do want to incorporate as much community feedback into this plan as possible. So as I transition to the Q&A portion, just some points to consider with discussion. Really, what are the areas that you would like to see managed? And this is really specific. I just remind folks to the Dorothea Watershed is what we're talking about. So in that context, what are the areas you'd like to see managed? What areas should be protected? What issues do you see related to water quality and flooding? And then any comments or questions on the two design sites that I just presented, Hull Bay and Miltyburg. So with that, I really appreciate your time, and just open it up to any Q&A. I think we have a bunch of questions that have come in the chat. So Carrie, maybe you want to read through those.
Yeah, we had a few questions come in, and those, if folks open the Q&A, can see all the typed answers in the answer section. But let me just read through what we had here. How does the Hull Bay vegetated buffer interact with tree shading for beachgoers? So I'll read my answer, but Andres, if you want to add something.
Sure.
We have, it will enhance the vegetated area and preserve the trees already there. It would involve adding more low-lying vegetation. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's good. I also had in my mind, having just envisioning maybe some direct pathways where, it'd be more deliberate access points from the parking lot to the beach, which would just allow for, keeping the existing vegetation and or preserving that buffering and more directing people towards some specific access points.
Right, good point. And then we just had someone ask what the other plan was. So Hillary answered that. DPNR has recently developed other plans at Hull Bay for improved boater access at the boat ramp and other ideas for managing parking. So these are not the same plans, but all the designers have been in touch.
Right. Yeah, we've certainly been in close contact with the other designers on this plan to make sure that the project that we presented in Hull Bay is going to be, compatible with what else is being contemplated there.
That's all we have in the Q&A. If anyone wants to type any questions, we're happy to take them there. Or if you want to raise your hand, I think, Andres, you can unmute them so they can ask it live.
Yes, I can.
Okay, we have another question. The 2006 Hull Bay Watershed Study included mangrove areas on the east side of the bay. Are there any plans to rehabilitate or restore them?
Right, so we're aware of the location that you're talking about. We specifically we don't have a design per se to restore the mangroves in that location, but we're aware of that, and we know that there could potentially be some improvements to the road there to allow for better connection from the sea to the mangroves. So I think it's just going to be something that could be highlighted in the plan. But we don't have a specific mangrove restoration plan as part of our watershed management plan, but it is certainly an area that we're aware of and we'll highlight.
Yeah, and I just added, it did rank highly in our ranking, but it just didn't make it to the top 2. And also, it's just a different type of plan than the 2 that we're developing. So while important, just didn't make it to the top 2 for this plan. We have another question. What does the next step look like? Implementation? Does DPNR have the funding available to put the practices in Hull Bay and Neltieburg into effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't mention this yet, but as part of our final package, we're going to be providing cost estimates for the projects. And so I think, once we have the cost estimates, I would expect, I don't want to speak for DPNR, but I definitely would expect, that the idea is to get these implemented. And so with the cost and with the plan, and, the plan being, a document that has these projects prioritized, is which the grant agencies like to see that projects being put forth for funding are prioritized in a plan. I think that, the next steps would be to apply for funding, grant funding to try to get these constructed.
Yeah, thanks, Andres. This is Hillary with DPNR. And we are already seeking funding for some of the watershed lands projects. Again, 8 have already been completed. And I know that at least the Hull Bay one, because again, it has a lot of that government act, it has a lot of suggestions for things that are they're plausible quickly because they're in government land. So I know we're seeking funding for a lot of the bipartisan infrastructure law funding that's coming to the territories. A lot of that's going towards watershed improvements. And in this case, while we're still not, we're still getting the final design, as everyone, including you, Andres, know best. It's looking good for some of that bipartisan infrastructure law funding. It's really exciting time to be going towards nature-based solutions because the federal administration is interested in that as well.
Thanks, Hillary.
We have another question. Will the cost estimates include long-term maintenance and operations costs for the projects to remain viable?
Oh, that's a great question. I think they certainly could. Normally, we would just do cost for the initial construction. Sometimes we do estimate kind of the annual O&M, and I think in this case, I mean, I think with that suggestion, we could add that we could add that cost in, because that's obviously really important. Not just what you have to do to maintain the structure, but then what the projected cost of that is. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Great. Another question. The area for the proposed vegetation at the front of the beach is in an area that gets hit by the high seas. How is that going to hold up with strong seas that come up right into the whole parking area?
Well, Carrie, you can, if you have any other thoughts, please feel free. But, in my mind, it really hasn't been developed out beyond just the need to have some additional buffering. And so the type of buffering, really hasn't been contemplated. And to be honest, it's not really the primary the component of the plan. The primary component of the plan is really this basin, this bioretention basin, and the conveyance that we're trying to design to really manage the water. And we haven't really gotten to the stage yet, because we haven't really finished the design to really figure out what exactly that additional vegetation might look like, other than it would seem like a good idea to have it there. So if there's any suggestions that anyone wants to put forth, we'd be happy to consider it as we kind of finish up the design.
Yeah, and just, we'd add that we would only be recommending native vegetation that is fairly robust and, already exists in other areas like with similar conditions. And we have another question. Have you considered the use of vetiver grass to stabilize roads, reduce erosion, stabilize and clean ponds, and manage the beach areas?
We definitely have, and we've researched and worked with vetiver grass to some extent on St. John, and we've included it in some past manuals that we've been developing. And it has been used with some success, and so certainly I think that would be a really good tool to try to utilize for sure. Yep. Not only there's several applications you might already know if you're familiar with it, but using it kind of as a terrace across a slope, or potentially at a culvert outlet, kind of mixed in with stone, or as a check dam in a ditch. So there's a lot of different applications for it, and obviously it does really well at erosion control once you can get it established. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Will the bioretention basin require digging?
So it will require some excavation to shape the basin initially, and then the idea with these types of basins is, it would really be trapping a lot of the sedimentation before it makes its way into Hull Bay. So yes, it would need to be periodically cleaned to be kept kind of maintained.
That's all we have so far in the chat. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to put them in. And again, you can also use the raise hand function if you'd like to be taken off mute, if you have anything to add.
Can we ask a question, please, from the DPNR room?
Please.
Yes, good evening. It's Torizo. This is Senator Volkes. I had a quick question. I know that the environmental assessment was done, but by chance was any hydrological assessments done as well?
Yes, so thanks for the thank you for the question. There have been hydrological assessments done, and so in order to size, properly size the different best management practices, including the bioretention basin at Hull Bay, we've used a hydrologic model in order to predict the amount of stormwater runoff which comes down into that area. And so by using the model, we're able to understand kind of how big the basin needs to be effective. So yes, certainly we've used hydrologic models. It's an important tool. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I was wondering, what was the time frame of the model? Was it a decade concerning models for hydrological?
Right. So the modeling that we actually use for this project is really just modeling specific storm events. And so there's storm events which are really over a period of a day or two, where you get a rainfall depth of say 6 inches, 7 inches, 8 inches. So they're not what I would call a continuous simulation models, to where you would be modeling, say a time period of like a year or 10 years or anything like that. So these are just individual runoff event models. And because obviously, no one storm is the same, when we do this modeling, we run a series of different storms. So we're not just running, 6 inches of rain, we run everything that we're designing kind of is influenced by those different rain events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we had one other question come in. The beach is registered with the National Preservation for Archaeological Digs. Will the rules be followed should findings be encountered? And Hillary already answered that in chat. She said yes. So just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
And we have a comment. If we look at natural beach areas, as in beaches that have not been developed and are not heavily used by humans, they do not look like Hull Bay, Megan's Bay, or any of the other well-used beaches in St. Thomas. They are full of tree line / forests and diverse in species and types of plants and trees. As at the well-used beaches, the tree line has been neglected to the point of one coconut tree or one sea grape tree spaced out. Development has done damage. High human use prevents new growth, and Irma destroyed many trees. Improved tree lines at all of our popular beaches is necessary.
Great. Thank you for that.
It's a great comment.
Absolutely.
Another question, how will DPNR limit building on steep slopes to reduce erosion? Or what practices are they going to require to prevent the erosion?
Hillary, would you like to try to field that, or would you like me to provide some input?
So it's a great point. It comes up certainly in terms of watershed management best practices. I think certainly the comprehensive land and water use plan, which is also very much underway, and now is a great time to head on over to that website, plan.usvi.com. We're always taking comments, and I think steep slopes and what to do about responsible development on steep slopes has come up a lot over the past year of that project. I think we know, yes, of course, something needs to be done, but how we make that fit with development that's already occurred and, equitable and affordable decision making, we haven't, I would say as a department, we haven't landed on what that's best to look like, and of course, it would be a community and legislative decision as well. So I do hope to keep this, this type of conversation going though, because I think steep slopes plays a lot into this. And right now, we just, it's up to our building codes and permits to make sure we abide by the existing code as it is.
Just that question, just to speak about some other things that are happening peripherally, is that the 2002 environmental handbook is nearing its long-awaited update, and that has improved and modernized best management practices that will guide how the department reviews building in the future. So that has been revised to reflect modern improvements in handling sediment and erosion controls on steep slopes. There's also been additional projects such as handling stormwater on unpaved roads, and Andreas put a lot of examples up, and there is in fact a document that was done back in, but to say, Andreas, you can help me here, maybe 2014, that was specifically for Pacific and Island Caribbean jurisdictions that spoke to the issues of unpaved roads and best management practices in handling stormwater on unpaved roads. So there are products and there are products out there that the department is continuously and over time socializing the community about those practices. Now, one of the challenges is, of course, implementation. So if someone is building a home, has a steep slope driveway, and we are requiring, and this is changing, and we're seeing it more and more, where our designers are actually listing and coming in where steep roadways, concrete roadways are not just moving water directly onto public right-of-ways, but are in fact intercepting through use of trench drains, through use of interception areas on their driveways. We're looking at the flow. So there are improvements that are occurring. We do need to continue to improve the information going out to the public so that they become aware of it. They ask their designers to implement these practices. So it's a continuous process, a dynamic process that is improvement, and we are committed to working on that. So thank you for that question, Laura.
And Andres, I would like to, this is Kitty, good night. I would like to answer the next question from Stacy regarding information or assistance for private property owners. This is a little bit of ahead of the gun, but we have the Department of Planning and Natural Resources has a brand new program that we were just awarded a grant called the Residential Erosion Control Initiative. We have a DPNR, a program called VI Clean Coasts, which is environmental support and stewardship for businesses, organizations, schools, and now homeowners. So this is being implemented by a local nonprofit, the Virgin Islands Conservation Society. And the Residential Erosion Control Initiative is going to be officially launched, I think, in the next month or two. We did a pilot program last year where homeowners were able to get consultations on their properties for erosion, flooding, I call them weird water issues. So keep an eye out for the next portion of that project that will be coming out into the public soon. You can, if you happen to be in the DPNR offices, we have a pamphlet called Keep the Bush that encourages property owners not to clear cut their entire property. And we're going to have a lot more information about that. Carol, I see your comment. If you check the most recent information is on the Virgin Islands Conservation Society website, viconservationsociety.org, and you can navigate to the VI Clean Coasts program that has all of the initiatives listed. And like I said, we just got the grant for this one, so it has not officially been pushed out. But I think we officially clicked accept on the grants management page, so we can talk about it.
Andreas, this is Mary, again over there in the Dorothea Watershed. Do you have a close-up of your bio basin and how it connects to the swale? Are you guys still developing it?
Would you mind speaking a little bit louder? I caught part of it. I think you're talking about the Hull Bay plan.
Sorry. Do you have a close-up of the bio retention pond that you've got there in Hull Bay and how it connects to the swale? Have you guys finished your design or are you still?
So we're right. So we're still kind of finalizing the design, but if you're familiar with the swale, I can just show you in this graphic right here. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. So the swale here, this is in orange. You can see that there's a swale here depicted in orange. So this is if you're familiar with the other plan that was done for the improvements at Hull Bay, this swale actually shows up on that plan. And so our line work is this new green feature right here. So you can see that what our idea is to basically take the water, which is coming down the swale and discharging out to the bay, but instead bringing it into this vegetated basin right here, but having the basin it would be what's called offline. So that means that if there was a really torrential heavy flow, this basin would it's only big enough to treat so much, right? We only have so much space. So the highest flows would kind of come around, so it wouldn't actually destroy this basin, in a really large event. So that's kind of why we have it designed this way, but it is designed, to take the runoff, which is coming down that, and then trapping and sequestering all the flow and all the sediment in this basin. Does that make sense?
So the primary place for the water to go is in the retention pond versus
Yes.
the swale.
Yes.
Humongous volume.
Correct.
Is there a reason why, Arlen and I had this discussion already, and I'm not sure if I agree with this synopsis. Reason why there's that curve there where it comes down the road. Yeah, right there. Why is that?
Right here.
That I actually, I'm not exactly sure why there's such a dramatic curve right there.
That's just incorporating the design that was already submitted so that it would be appropriate for the recommendations that they have as well for the other plan.
Right, so that fits in with the alignment of the proposed alignment there, right?
That's correct. And if for some reason that plan didn't happen, that it wouldn't need to curve like that and could just go more straight.
Yeah.
But necessarily, if it was more straight.
Right.
So how about the road coming down? Are you guys planning on doing anything with that? The way the water flows, so that's the flat part right there, or down towards the southeast part of the road.
Right.
Like we're doing the hillside coming down, when drainage comes down.
Right. So I think, really what I think is needed there is to better stabilize that area. And also, we're not calling it out on this plan, but obviously there's a lot of what I would call like rogue parking, people kind of parking, off in here and creating along the road a lot of compacted areas and a lot of exposed vegetated areas. I think trying to eliminate that and really just creating more of a stable course for the water to be able to flow without causing erosion down. We haven't really developed it any more than that to date, but like that was just kind of the vision for it, would just be to basically stabilize that water course.
So the hillside, the steep hillside leading down the Hull Bay. You guys, I had talked to the Department of Public Works. They had said that they weren't planning on doing. It wasn't on the list at all to deal with the drainage there. Is that something because right now the water just sort of, excuse me, it's on one side and then it's on the other, and there is some erosion that comes down. like that. It's not exactly. It doesn't look like an easy fix, but, I was just.
Right. Well, I don't think it's gonna show up specifically as this plan, but I think, now that we're talking about it, I think we would take that, I'm aware of it and I know that I kind of walked that area and saw the same thing. So I think we can highlight that, as an important, project that would be done in conjunction with this project, to stabilize that upland area, because the more we can stabilize the upland area like that, the better it would be on, the longevity of this practice, so that it's, not just picking up a bunch of sediment and filling in. So it's really to the advantage to kind of stabilize those areas as well. So I think we can make sure that that's, highlighted in the plan.
And I'd also add that we do have, I believe, at least 3 other sites identified in that area that you're talking about that just didn't make the top 2. But they're in that ranking that Andre showed previously as a priority area for the watershed. And they'll definitely be detailed in the plan, even if they aren't receiving the engineering design as part of the plan.
That's right. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Carrie, that there are a couple other bullets. So I guess when we're done with the plan, I think you'll be able to see some of that detail for those other projects, because I think those will be really relevant to what you're talking about.
Okay, looking forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, we have a few more questions in the chat too. Did the project consider the feasibility of recommending permeable or semi-permeable road for Nelteberg?
No, and I think the reason being, I don't really think that that's the right environment for that. It's a really, the fact that it's unpaved, it's rock, there's a lot of rock. I don't think something like that would survive very well. I think that, in my opinion, my experience on trying to manage roads like that, I think it's better to harden the road the best you can and and really just try to get the water off the road, and then manage that runoff, within practices alongside the road, rather than deliberately trying to create a condition where the water would actually seep into a road like that. I just think it would be really challenging over time to maintain something like that, and also really expensive, given that the road is very long and really steep. So I don't think it's exactly the right place to do that.
We have another question. Why does the presentation use old satellite imagery for the plan? The bay's uses have changed significantly, and some other issues with parking have arisen from the changes in use. I would say that the imagery we're showing here is current as of the spring of 2023. So we use several different imagery sources depending on the scale that we're looking at and what we're using it for. So we do have some older imagery that we consult, but we always make sure that we're using the most current data we have. So we have data that is, several years old, and we have some good data from 2019 and areas that we noted change. We flew with our drone in 2023 in the spring so that we could capture that more up-to-date imagery for those areas. And that does include the Hull Bay area. Okay. Hopefully that addresses your question.
Thanks, Gary.
Regarding education, if it is not already included, could Medline Plus poisoning, toxicology, environmental health topic be included as a resource for members of the public to use to find environmental health information? Let me provide a link on that.
Hmm.
And we had one other, is it possible to include our data in the CDC's environmental justice dashboard and EPA's environmental justice mapping tool? And Hillary already answered that. Great question. Right now, USVI is not on the EPA's environmental justice mapping tool, but it is an ongoing conversation. So thanks for that. Okay. Had another note about the drainage coming down the hill there by Hell Bay.
Mhm.
You have to double check, but at the T of the intersection, I believe, is an old natural spring on the opposite that also brings water down on the road directly into the beach that does not seem to be addressed in this.
Okay. Noted.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
That is. There are not any more questions. I'm wondering, Hillary, if there's anybody on your side that would like to give closing remarks, or can I just close us out?
Thanks, Andreas. This is Marlon. Thank you very, very much, Andreas, and your team for doing the presentation, for preparing, and for, of course, all the work that has gone on behind the scenes to get to this point. Thank you to the public for your very good questions. I think some thought-provoking questions as well as some good information that's being provided to us. And that is exactly the goal of this type of forum, to have people give us more information that helps us to put together a more sound watershed management plan, provides us with additional data that we can then research to ensure that the product that we put out is certainly considerate of all the inputs that we receive from the public. So I do appreciate your time, or we do appreciate your time. We appreciate you spending the last hour and a half with us and listening, and then providing all this valuable information and input. This is not the end of it, of course. Andreas put up his email address. So please, if you do think of anything else, please do not hesitate to provide that information, to provide those thoughts and comments to us. They're always valued. They're always valuable. Ms. Berry, I do think we may have missed one of your questions regarding what is the swale going to be made out of. I don't have a significant answer for that, except to say that we have had the experience, and I know the Division of Fish and Wildlife, also under the DPNR umbrella, recommends utilizing stoned line swales because they provide corridors for wildlife. They also provide habitats for wildlife. So, small insects such as lizards, or native Tropidosis snake, for example, can hide in crevices, whereas concrete swales usually just convey. They do not have any wildlife potential for the most part. So stone line swales are a portion. It may be a hybrid portion that it may need to be strictly concrete, and other portions may actually integrate stone line areas. Andreas, if I spoke out of turn, please don't hesitate to wrap me on my knuckles and let me know that I'm talking stupidness. But I think that's the way we're going to look at it. Ms. Lohman mentioned natural infrastructure, so utilizing nature-based materials, such as stones, which are Rock City is known for stones, so we have plenty of that. So just wanted to make sure we answered that question, but again, just in closing, and Andres, you can close out with your email address, just to let you know that we are open to other comments, and suggestions, and we will be in touch again, when this plan is going to be finalized. We take your comments and suggestions very seriously, and want to let you know that we will continue to be in touch with you, the public. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with you and information sharing. So have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks again, everybody. And my email is here on the screen, so please feel free to reach out if you have any other comments or questions. Thanks again. Have a good night, everybody.